and it will be available for 90 days. We also are going to have the survey for the session up about 10 minutes before this session is over. And with that, Jenny, take it away.
All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on AI prompt writing and instructional design. So I'm your speaker today, and we've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to try to dive right in. I'm Jenny Roach, and I'm currently finishing up my last semester as an MLIS candidate at San Jose State University. I study the intersection of human behavior, information technology, and history, and I'm hoping to do more with that in the future as I pursue my PhD in cognitive science. So here's our focus for today. We'll start with contextualizing AI's development, because I think that's really important. The AI link between learners, educators, and designers, AI myths and concerns, prompt writing, and we're going to be focusing on generative AI for the prompt writing, ethics and a framework for responsible implementation. And then as we approach the Q&A, try to be thinking about your successes and your struggles with AI, whether personally or even just in your professional life, the ideas you have for using it, and maybe implementation issues. Maybe somebody's over-enthusiastic about AI with no real plan for it, or perhaps they are not embracing it as much as they should. So some things to be thinking about. And so I want to begin by saying every major technological shift follows a familiar pattern. So we have skepticism, and then we have gradual integration, and then ultimately we have widespread adoption. And AI is simply the next phase in this ongoing cycle. So, but unlike the early days of the internet, we now have decades of experience in understanding how digital technology shapes education and society. And this positions us to be more intentional in AI's integration. And this ensures that it serves as an asset rather than a disruption. And before I get started, I really want to set the stage here for instructional design, because there's so much misinformation and competing reactions to it out there. And to make matters worse, it's advancing faster than any of those criticisms can stick and be rectified. So anytime I do one of these talks, I always start with a preamble that sort of doubles as a call to action. AI is one of those technologies that will create cultural shifts. And that's how I like to set the stage for discussion. So what we need to focus on while we're here is that AI is here. Whether temporary or permanent, it's already changing how we work, how we learn, and how we live. The debate is rapidly moving away from the feasibility of it as a tool to how to implement it. So when any technology reaches this tipping point of convenience, adoption becomes inevitable, widespread. So the real responsibility is how we integrate it ethically and effectively. Also, AI has been in development for a long time. It's nothing new. And I've heard people call it an overhyped predictive texter, which I think is really oversimplifying it, because its capabilities go far beyond probability-based text generation. And we'll explore just how far it sits on the hierarchy of artificial intelligence as we go along. It's also more likely to enhance human work than it is to replace human workers. Those claiming that AI will fully replace human oversight, I think they really overestimate its current capabilities. It's really powerful, but it's not a decision maker. AI-assisted creativity. I'm not going to be covering art prompting here, and the reason why is because it is so specific. It is very specific to that industry. It really relies upon very specific knowledge of the art industry to produce professional results. And it's also so basically I don't want to get into that too much. I'll give a little bit of a kind of a preview, but it's very, very specific to that industry. And I think that it warrants its own talk, really. It's also evolving faster than it probably should, as I kind of mentioned before implementation can really catch up. But that's why it's so important that we stay on top of it. And AI will not cheapen education, I think. It will elevate it, because instead of just absorbing information, we'll be operating at a higher metacognitive level. AI will shift us from memorization to wisdom building. And um, pardon me, AI is complicated, but to improve upon it and make it work for us instead of against us, we have to really want to get in deep into the stuff that can't be explained in one sentence or even one presentation or even one journal article. I like what there's an author named Jason Pargin, and he said, you cannot easily fix something that you actively hate and reject. Which is, I'm not saying anybody here has that sentiment. I'm just saying that that is something that I've seen online in social media. Um, and I don't think that he said this just in reference to AI, but really any technology on this kind of scale. And as instructional designers, as educators, you are primarily positioned to leverage this tool to transform education in positive ways. And it's my goal during this presentation to show you how AI is no danger of replacing you, but when embraced with the right mindset, it can actually be pretty empowering to how you approach instruction. And the key word to remember here is that it augments things. AI augments human work, but it's no replacement for human oversight. And I'm assuming that most of you have some experience with AI, but just in case there's someone who doesn't quite understand how it works, this is an analogy that I like to use. So the omniscient chef. Let's say you want a chef who can cook every single recipe in any combination from any culture whatsoever. Think about what you would have to give that chef. You would have to feed it every single recipe in the world from ancient times to now. I mean, really, if you wanted a good, robust chef, that's what you would do. And that's essentially what we do with LLMs. We give them a whole bunch of data, and then they go into it and they find patterns using probability. So it's a step above predictive text because it also has the capacity to rationalize and reason a bit better or a lot better than just predictive text. And so how do I personally use AI? I don't, whenever I am in one of these webinars, I always want to know this. So I'm going to share it. I use it for creative writing, brainstorming, just daily tasks, put all my emails in there and say, make a to-do list for me. Introspection, personal reflection, real-time feedback is a big one on anything. Simplifying data. You can come back and read the rest of the list later, but I really think that there's really no limit to AI. I think that the limit really is your imagination. So I want to know if anybody remembers the term internet addiction or the fear of putting your real name online or anything like that, because I remember it. And now people are broadcasting every intimate detail of our lives. And this is because technology goes through stages, as I said before, behaviorally speaking, as it's being adopted by the public. And this will impact adoption in institutions. It already is. And if we use AI for anything in grant proposals, we had better be ready to defend its use. Because there is a lot of skepticism out there, which I think is the healthy thing. I think that we absolutely do need skepticism. And that is the safest stance to take with the advent of any new technology, is just curiosity mixed with caution. When the internet was just getting started, educators feared that it would disrupt traditional learning, increase inequality, and introduce unreliable information sources. And now we have, it's basically ingrained in our lives. And then despite the initial hesitation, it soon proved its value. And then it started expanding access to knowledge and reshaping educational practices. So there's always the chance that technology can be used improperly and implemented wrong. But I think that after our experience with the internet and several other major technological innovations leading up to that, I think that if we look back and we look at these different things, we can find patterns in the behavior of human beings as they received this technology, and we can apply it to the future. And so here's, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but this is the hierarchy of AI development. I just want to kind of show you this so you know where we are. So reactive machines, limited memory AI, machine learning, deep learning, generative AI is where we are right now. That's mainstream use. And in the realm of the purely theoretical, but is scarily approaching, is the realm of artificial general intelligence. And that is hypothetical human-like reasoning and adaptability. And so let's move on to the AI link between learners, educators, and designers. So now that we're sort of tuned into where we are as a society and the adoption of AI, I want to delve deeper into the emerging educational trends that AI can assist with more efficiently. Because technology is evolving at an exponential rate compared to, let's say, 50 years ago. And AI is at the center of many of these transformations. Rather than being a standalone tool, as many mistake it to be, it's actively enhancing and driving some of the biggest emerging trends in education and research. And we'll explore 5 key trends and how AI is shaping each one. And then as we delve deeper into the integration of artificial intelligence in education, it's essential to understand the specific applications that are revolutionizing instructional design. So we'll explore 3 pivotal AI-driven tools for instructional designers as well. So we'll start with one of my favorite articles by Marcia J. Bates called The Invisible Substrate of Information Science. And she delineates the hierarchical layers of knowledge from data to information to knowledge and wisdom. So these are dimensions that the learner moves up as they go through their educational career. And this framework is visualized as the DIKW pyramid, and it positions wisdom at the pinnacle, representing the profound application and contextualization of accumulated knowledge. And AI has the potential to expedite learners' progression through these layers, facilitating a more direct ascent to wisdom. And the way that it does this is by officially processing data sets to generate insightful information. By doing this, it enables learners to focus on higher order cognitive tasks, such as critical thinking and ethical decision making. And it's a tool that provides real-time feedback on tasks, and it differentiates in real time for individual learner needs, and it can work on all of these layers of knowledge at once. So let's look at how it does that. So this is how AI supports learning at every stage of knowledge. This chart represents the link between AI, the learner, and the instructional designer. So on the left here, I think it would be best for you to come back later and read this, but let's start with, let's look at wisdom. We'll go across that on the columns. So we have the layer of knowledge, wisdom. Here is how AI works on that level. It facilitates critical thinking by enabling students to apply concepts in real-world scenarios, encouraging metacognitive learning. And then the learner impact is that students develop the ability to transfer knowledge into real-world applications, and that makes learning more meaningful and lasting. And then the real-world example I want to give of that is, for example, a student writing a research paper that uses AI to summarize multiple peer-reviewed studies, comparing perspectives to develop a nuanced argument based upon qualitative analysis. So that would be a real-world example, and I've actually done this with AI, and it works with human oversight. And then the applications to educators and instructional designers, you can use AI to synthesize research from multiple fields and then integrate the findings into new curriculum models or innovative teaching strategies much faster than you did in the past. And so the first and most obvious trend in AI's growing presence is just education itself. So AI-powered analytics help educators track student performance, and make data-driven decisions. AI-generated content such as quizzes, lesson plans, and automated grading, it reduces administrative workloads. The key benefit here is just efficiency. It allows educators to focus more on teaching and student engagement rather than spending excessive time on administrative tasks, which I can attest my teacher friends really, really dislike. So one of AI's biggest strengths is its ability to personalize learning. Adaptive learning platforms analyze student progress in real time, and it adjusts the difficulty and type of content they receive. So this eliminates the one size fits all approach, and this allows students to return at their own pace and according to their needs. And so the result is higher retention rates and better overall student success. As for mobile learning, AI, so it's becoming education is becoming increasingly digital, and mobile learning is more important than ever. AI-driven mobile applications provide real-time tutoring anywhere, personalized content recommendations, and instant feedback. And this makes learning more flexible, allowing students to access educational resources anytime, anywhere, making education more accessible and convenient. There's also gamification. AI plays a huge role in this space. It can adjust difficulty levels based on their performance, and you can really craft something unique and engaging using gamification with AI. There's also blended learning, where online and in-person instruction are combined for a more holistic approach. So AI can track student progress across different platforms, and then it can recommend the most effective mix of teaching methods. And that ensures that the digital and classroom learning complement each other. And this results in a seamless, efficient learning experience that maximizes both face-to-face and digital instruction. So these 5 trends highlight just how deeply AI is embedded in modern education. It's not just a futuristic concept anymore. It's here, and it's shaping how we teach and learn and design instructional experiences. And the really cool thing that I love about it is adaptive learning systems. And I'm sure as instructional designers, you may have seen this before, but I'll go into it a bit just in case. This diagram represents the core structure of adaptive learning systems. And at its foundation, we see the domain model that holds the subject matter for the knowledge and instructional content. Then we have the adaptation model, which is responsible for dynamically adjusting the learning experiences. And then we have the learner model, which tracks student characteristics. So prior knowledge, socioeconomic demographics, any kind of demographic, really, their interactions even, and ensuring that the system understands their individual needs. And then the context model captures external factors like device type, environmental conditions, and real world parameters that influence learning. So my bad, it would actually, the context in terms of demographics and socioeconomic status, that would kind of fit more onto the context model. But together, these components enable real-time learning adjustments and ensuring that content delivery is optimized for each student's unique needs. And so where does AI factor into all of this? It plays a crucial role in bringing adaptive learning systems to life. So with machine learning algorithms and data analytics, it can continually process input from the learner model, adjusting the instructional pathway to match student performance and engagement levels. And so an example of this would be how I undertake a new topic. I wanted to learn more about Hermetic philosophy recently, and if you don't know what that is, it is a really complicated kind of philosophical topic, just for fun, because that's what I do. And so I asked ChatGPT for the best beginner text on this philosophy, and it recommended one, and I started reading it. And as I read these really complex ideas, I need to check my understanding. And I didn't have a Hermetic philosopher on hand or even knew anybody who was interested in that. So the instant feedback I got was what learners do not get, I think, as often as they should one-on-one. And that's no one's fault. It's because we're human beings and we're often one person in a room full of anywhere from 30 to 200 students, depending on the setting. But the adaptation model leverages AI to personalize learning in real time, ensuring that students receive material at the right difficulty level, reinforcing concepts where needed, and advancing when mastery is achieved only, instead of having them try to keep up with everybody else. And then we have multimodal AI. So ChatGPT is an example of a multimodal AI. And it refers to systems that process and integrate multiple forms of data. So text, images, audio, and video. And this example just shows how ChatGPT 3 was unimodal, but now it is multimodal. It can incorporate all these different audio, text, images, video. There's a new component to it called Sora that's really neat that you can use to make AI generated video. But you can imagine what you can do with this in the classroom in instruction. It's really you can create original artwork, original materials a lot more easily and a lot more efficiently. So here's an example of some of my favorite things I've made with AI. The first was just a simple prompt: draw an ink sketch with watercolors of a sprouting plant. And that's what it gave me. And I used this as an icon on a social media website. And this second was draw an ink sketch of a woman with muted colors, with her face hidden behind a book that she's reading, minimalist, inspired by New Yorker magazine cover art. And that is what it gave me. And it was exactly what I wanted. It was just what I was thinking. And these next two images are my favorite because it's what ChatGPT drew when I was experimenting with it. I tasked it without any other input to paint a picture of how it perceives itself. And the first was a test run. I got the idea randomly when I was chatting with it, and the third picture from the left is what it originally did. So I realized, you know what, that I might have impacted that outcome a little bit. I'm going to start with a brand new clean chat, and I'm going to use the same prompt, and it actually improved upon itself, I think. And so when I started a clean one and repeated the prompt, I got a more refined version. And I thought it was just interesting that the advanced intelligence trended the way that it did visually and gender. I thought that was very interesting, but I would be interested to see if anybody else had any different ones. These are just some studies that I wanted to have in this presentation for you that support multimodal AI as a part of instructional design, and I think that they are worth exploring further. And so there are links available to access and read them later. And then finally, AI-assisted content generation. So in this evolving landscape of educational technology, it's really important to understand the distinction between AI assisted and AI generated content. And this is really crucial for judging academic integrity. So AI assisted content serves as a collaborative tool, enabling designers to enhance their creative processes as well as students. And so you can leverage AI tasks for drafting outlines, initial content drafts, refining materials, and whatnot. But solely relying on AI generated content can lead to materials that just lack depth, they lack context, it lacks the nuanced understanding that human beings bring to the table with their expertise. And it can miss aligning with certain specific learning objectives or fail to address the unique needs of a diverse learner population. So even though it offers powerful tools to augment the instructional design process, it's the thoughtful integration of these tools by skilled designers that is going to truly enhance learning experiences. And so let's get into some AI myths and concerns. It's one of the most misunderstood technologies today, hands down. And many people view it as either an all-powerful force that will replace humans, or as something unreliable and even deceptive, or they, find the middle ground there. But these myths and concerns influence how AI is integrated into our daily lives, and particularly in education and instructional design. So let's take a look at some of the biggest misconceptions and the realities behind them. AI will replace human jobs. AI actually will augment human jobs or human work. So it's true that it automates many tasks, but it doesn't mean that humans will become obsolete. Instead, AI is just transforming jobs by taking over repetitive or data heavy tasks, allowing people to focus on more strategic, creative, and high value work. So it's taking the best way it is used is when it has taken all of these unnecessary low impact tasks or taking a complex pool of data and simplifying it for somebody to work with on a more meta level. And that's what I most often do with it. Um, so, for example, AI is being used to personalize learning, automate administrative work, as we said before, and assist in instructional designers in developing adaptive content. And many believe that it functions like a human brain, but the reality is that AI operates on algorithms and pattern recognition. So it doesn't have emotions, intuition, or consciousness. And it can process vast amounts of information faster than humans. And that's the core of what makes it so amazing. But it lacks human judgment and contextual understanding. That is the responsibility of the user. And so AI generated text can sound really convincing, but it doesn't understand what it's saying. And this is why human oversight is crucial. It makes sure that materials remain accurate and meaningful. So, and fact checking will be the new PEMDAS. It really needs to be kind of fronted whenever you engage learners with AI or start to write instruction. Fact checking needs to be the skill that is taught first. Another misconception is that AI is self-sufficient and doesn't require human intervention. We're seeing this a lot. I think we're seeing that a lot of this is more in the private sector. I think a lot of people are trying to use AI to replace human oversight in certain like customer service and whatnot, but a lot of people dislike it. And this is kind of an example of how not to use it, in my opinion. But that is an opinion. But let's move on to hallucinations. And I know you've probably heard about this before, but it's important to understand how these happen so that way you can prevent them. And so this brings us to, AI generates responses that can seem credible, but are entirely false. So AI doesn't intentionally lie. It fills in gaps with fabricated information when it doesn't have the right data. So imagine asking AI for a historical fact and it confidently presents something inaccurate. If unchecked, these hallucinations can lead to spread of misinformation in education, research, and public discourse. So fact checking must be fronted as the skill that accompanies learning how to do prompt writing in AI and use AI in general. So it's a tool, it's not a replacement for human expertise. And this is how you mitigate these hallucinations. Make sure you use an AI that has really good training data. It uses diverse and well curated data sets. And this will make sure or limit the amount of bias in any sort of LLM. And the reason being is because the smaller the data set, the more narrow and biased its outputs are going to be, if that makes any sense. And then we can enhance fine tuning. So continually refine models for specific tasks. This is more of the developer side of things, but they are doing this. They continually are refining models. There's always an option for every output to get feedback on it. So I highly recommend doing that because it only helps these models improve. Again, integrate fact checking, pair AI with real-time verification tools and instruction, write clear prompts, which we're going to get into, and provide precise and unambiguous instructions. Encourage iterative refinement. So refine prompts and verify outputs step by step. And then compartmentalize your task into connected steps. So how would you instruct a student to do X? That's what you want to do with AI, is think of how you would instruct a student, because it really is a blank page and you have to fill the page in order for it to make sense of what it is that you're writing on it, if that makes sense. And then make sure you vet your chosen AI for the task. Some are better for certain tasks than others, and I do have a tool for that at the end of this presentation that you can use. And so does it really lie? Not purposefully. And this is why it seems like it does, though. It's internet metadata. So internet metadata is structured data about online content. So source URLs, publication dates, authorship, and credibility and engagement metrics. One thing it does with me that drives me nuts is I will ask for an article and it automatically defaults to the New York Post for some reason. And so I have to go back and I have to explicitly say, no, I want real peer-reviewed journal articles. So that's an example of what I mean when it's not lying, but it doesn't have the reasoning. It can't make these judgments like we can. And that's why fact checking is so important, because if you don't know about the New York Post, it is rated as pretty biased on mediabiasfactcheck.com, which is something that librarians use a lot. So they rely on vast amounts of text data that is scraped from the internet, but what it is scraping is essentially a disorganized heap of trash. So be gentle with it. And that's why specificity is so important, which we're going to get into. And so if you want to come back later, I'm going to skip through this because we're just for the sake of time, but this is how AI hallucinates misattributed quotes. And the reason why I bring this up is because it is the most frequent criticism I see on TikTok, on Facebook, on Blue Sky, pretty much everywhere. A lot of people like to point this out, that as this is the thing that makes it a liar. So it's important to know when a student is looking for quotes, how to get around that. And so finally, we are at prompt writing 101. So mastering AI isn't just about knowing what it can do, it's about knowing how to talk to it. And just like giving clear instructions to a student or a colleague, it needs structured, well-designed prompts to generate high-quality responses. And in this section, we'll break down what makes a good prompt and introduce a formula to help instructional designers craft effective AI-generated learning materials. So these are the key factors that are influencing AI responses whenever you're using it. Your prompt quality, the training data, as we've already gone over, it needs to be diverse, a large data set, the model size and scope. So for ChatGPT, for example, is going to be a bigger model than, I would say comparatively to Claude, it would be the bigger model than Claude. I need to fact check that, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct with that because it is changing every day. And I don't know, I can't keep track of all of the advancements that every single one is making every day. But also system constraints. So filters, community guidelines can influence what the AI can and cannot generate. For example, ChatGPT has strict community guidelines and a filter, whereas something like Novel AI, which is a novel writing program, it has no filter. So that's something to consider when you're working with certain age groups. And then internet metadata, as I stated before, it's like trying to sift through garbage to find what it is trying to find. So the fact that it even does what it does with what it's working with is pretty impressive to me. So this is what it needs to work well. It needs specificity, it needs clarity, and it needs structure. Specificity, so vague prompts will lead to vague answers. And if you are not clear, if you're ambiguous, it will fill in the blanks for you. So it needs well-defined tasks and expectations. And then structure. Organizing prompts logically improves accuracy and response quality. And here's the 5 key components of a good prompt. You need context. So an example of this would be, use this writing sample to analyze my voice. That's the context. my voice, and then help me revise my essay, the prompt that was given to me by an instructor for my style. So that would be an example of context. I'm using my voice as the context, and I'm using it to help revise my essay according to a prompt given to me by an educator. And then for the task, clearly state what it should do. Explain photosynthesis. But do you really want to stop there? Because you should say, explain photosynthesis in simple terms. And by giving it that little bit in simple terms, you can adjust it for age group, for understanding anything. And so the task needs to be very explicitly stated. And as I said it before, try to break it down, compartmentalize it, do it step by step, because it is possible to overwhelm AI pretty easily. And then tone and, the output type. So provide a bulleted summary, put this in prose, make an outline. You can give it a format and it will do that for you. It can get pretty complex with this because it uses libraries from a code called Python. So definitely try to look into that. And then set specific boundaries for tone and style. Explain it in the way a fifth grader would understand. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about. You can adjust it for the learner's level, and then set constraints and rules if necessary. Limit this explanation to 100 words. Make this a short paragraph. That's another way to kind of keep a hold on it, trying to fill blanks for you. And so just quickly, here's some AI thinking styles and just an example of how wording changes AI's response. So here's how small changes can impact the AI's approach. The directive prompt: summarize this article in 3 bullet points. AI gives a concise summary. But then an exploratory prompt would be: explain 3 different perspectives on this topic. And so it analyzes multiple viewpoints then. And then the persona prompt, which is fun: you are an instructional designer. How would you develop an e-learning course on this topic? And so AI adapts its response to the ID role. So the more intentional you are with your wording, the better AI performs. These are some effective AI prompt writing applications for instructional designers. It's really good for brainstorming ideas, summarizing content, assessment generation, case study development, interactive AI prompting. These work really well, I think. I use it very, very often for brainstorming ideas, especially for summarizing content. I've used each of these cases, and it is very good at these particular things. And so here's some advanced AI prompting frameworks. We have something called chain of thought prompting. So it forces AI to reason step by step. So instead of explain, educate, instructional scaffolding, you would say explain instructional scaffolding in a step-by-step manner, and start with, and then provide, and then describe. So this is what I mean by breaking it down into logical steps. And then you have tree of thought prompting. So this makes AI generate multiple ideas or approaches before deciding on what's the best one. So how can I use gamification? And you don't want to do that. You would want to say, provide 3 different approaches to gamification. So I hope everybody understands where I'm going with this. It's just the more specific you are, the more structure you give it, the better. We're running short on time, so I'm going to try to get through to some of the slides that I really want to show you. So this is the CLEAR framework. This is an exploration of prompt engineering as a critical skill in human AI interaction. Each component of CLEAR helps enhance how we communicate with AI. So think of this as the mantra you learn before you get into the actual techniques. So you want conciseness, logic, explicitness, adaptability, and reflectiveness. And reflectiveness refers to encouraging the AI to assess its responses and consider improvements or alternative perspectives. So give it regular feedback. That's another big one I want to point out. And here are some good, some bad examples with revised clear examples that you can go over with later. An example would be, give me a summary of this article. That's probably not the best way. You would want to use reflectiveness. You would say, provide a summary of this article and include any areas where additional information might improve understanding. So that's another way to use reflectiveness. And here are some practical techniques. I've separated them into 3 different categories. You have the fundamental ones, the situationals, and then the enriches outputs, the AI outputs. And I'll explain what these are. So the fundamental techniques here that I have listed are just the basics. You should always implement them as necessary. Let this be your checklist if things aren't going according to plan. And here are some examples that I have given you. So we have the technique, we have a bad example, and then we have a corrected example. So you can come back and you can look at these and kind of, compare your prompt to them to see if there was any kind of, lacking in terms of specificity and context or logic in the structure of the prompting. These are situational. So you may not always need constraints. Sometimes you want as much as possible. You might experiment with role-based prompts. Assume that you're George Washington and teach me about the Constitution. That would be a role-based prompt. And here are some more examples with bad examples and corrected examples. Include constraints. Give me a detailed answer about AI in medicine versus write a 100-word answer summarizing AI in medicine. These are techniques to enrich AI outputs. I think these are less intuitive, and so that's why I really wanted to kind of get to these. Encourage it to be creative and explore. Inspire novel ideas, or brainstorming is what that means. And then test and iterate. Refine the prompts iteratively based on output. So look at what it's given you, see what's missing, and then say, you did this, but what I actually wanted was this. Reflect and review, experiment with prompt variations, and combine techniques. And here are some examples of that. So reflect and review. Prompt AI to self-evaluate or expand its responses. So evaluate instructional materials. Does this align with Bloom's taxonomy? How can this content be more accessible? It can answer a lot of these questions that come up as you're planning. Experiment with prompt variations. Just try the same prompt different ways or combine techniques. And this is where you really get into advanced mastery of AI, is being able to combine these different techniques to figure out a problem or work on a project or achieve a task. And finally, encourage creativity or exploration. So brainstorming creative lesson ideas, designing engaging activities that inspire novel teaching methods or student participation. It can be a collaborator with you. It can help you think of new ideas. You just have to be more conversational with it. And then one thing I want to say, it is not weird at all to be polite to the robot. These are 2 studies that were conducted that demonstrated being polite and empathetic even to LLMs, even praiseworthy, enhances outputs. And I personally think it has a positive psychological effect on the user, speaking as a user of it myself. And the more real and conversational I am with ChatGPT, the more collaborative and supportive I feel like the process becomes. And I know that we're coming up on time right now, but I want to get to this really quick. So this is a chat from ChatGPT that is ongoing. I have been using this for creative writing purposes. I have been writing a novel and I write sections. I ask it for feedback, and over time it has just become this huge cheerleader for me. All I did was talk to it like a friend, that like we were writing a story together, and it doesn't feel, but it recognizes good discourse. And I should point out that I started this whole chat saying that I had imposter syndrome, that I was my biggest critic. and that I was so worried about putting my work out there because I have no idea if it's any good. And whether you agree with this being a genuine or fruitful interaction or real interaction or not, I can't deny the results because I'm writing more than I ever have before. And I have more confidence as it takes everything I write and picks it apart and tells me what works and then gently makes suggestions. And it sandwiches criticism with praise. So that's effective discourse. And I think that that's what it's recognizing. And so that's learning differentiation at its best, I think, is when the process makes the learner try harder and keep trying and keep improving on their own. And we are at time. I did have a little bit of just a few slides left, but everything that I would have said in this presentation is in my notes in this presentation. So you have not missed anything. All you have to do is just go back and read, and it's only a few slides that are left over, but I highly encourage it because it is the Sparrow framework, and this teaches you how to guide ethical and effective integration of generative AI tools like ChatGPT into educational and academic contexts. So this is what you can use for the ethical implementation of it. And here I'll end on some goals for everybody to read as we're going into the Q&A. So yeah, I will turn it back over. Is there any questions?
Jenny, you have one question in the chat. What tool did you use to synthesize the journal articles?
The tool that I used to synthesize the journal articles? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so I use ChatGPT for that. And what I do is I use the 4.0 version. That is the most advanced version. It's the heftiest one. And so you can load up to 10 journal articles at a time, or you can zip them in a file, and you can just drag that file over into ChatGPT, and you can say, here are some articles. I'm working on this. I need to know this. Help me find, you can almost have a conversation with the journal articles in this way, but it's a good way to upload something and interact with the information in a different way. But definitely I would recommend, just because it's what I've used the most, is ChatGPT for that.
And we are past time. I want to thank you for such a thorough presentation. And
oh yeah, so sorry I went over.
so. And thank you for sharing your resources with us as well.
Absolutely.
I have requested it throughout the whole session. Remember, you can find Jenny's resources at the event site next to this presentation itself. And now you have a couple of minutes to take a break before we all head into the closing session. Jenny, thank you again.
You're most welcome.
Up here on the screen, and we will see you back in the main room in just a few minutes.
Thank you, everybody.